it's a fascinating case in these circumstances to see the way they are responding to the attention. It would probably be fair to say that Rishi should have the advantage, and that's why he's actually challenged Keir Starmer for these massive debates, because having been Prime Minister, he's been subjected to much more scrutiny than a leader of the opposition is.
Now, we're 36 hours into the general election campaign, and what are the polls telling us so far? Well, with us is Robert Hayward, Conservative peer and polling analyst. Welcome back.
Good morning.
So since the election's been called, what are we getting from the polls?
Slightly mixed polls. They're still showing the very substantial Labour lead, bit up, bit down. But I think, to be honest, the election campaign doesn't have an impact on people's voting intentions for a number of days. It's always the case that any major political event takes about 7 to 10 days to actually impact properly on the polls. I hate overnight polls as a result of it, because you guys quite naturally say, this is what the impact has been. The reality is that it hasn't. People need to go to the pub, they need to talk to their neighbours or their relatives to change or influence their views generally.
So what would you say would have to happen for the Conservatives to turn this around and to win this election?
There's no question that the big single issue is economics. And interestingly enough, it may be becoming more clear over the last few days why Rishi's gone now. You had the inflation figures, you've had the gas price cap today, which actually comes into effect 3-4 days before, on the Monday, before people vote on the Thursday. So I think it's becoming more clear why he went now. And say economics is by far the top issue for people's voting intentions.
One of the points that we were discussing earlier on is the fact that neither of these men have actually competed together as a leader in a general election campaign. And that in itself is going to be quite telling. They don't have the experience, do they?
No, they don't. And it's a fascinating case in these circumstances to see the way they are responding to the attention. It would probably be fair to say that Rishi should have the advantage, and that's why he's actually challenged Keir Starmer for these massive debates, because having been Prime Minister, he's been subjected to much more scrutiny than a leader of the opposition is.
Be really interesting to see. Thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us. Very grateful to you. That's Robert Hayward, the Conservative peer and the polling analyst.
Jack, I realise we're early on in this thing and we probably shouldn't do this every day, but who won day one? Is it possible to assess how this thing has started?
Well, I think generally it started quite predictably. I think that would be my overriding feeling. I switched off 4 different programmes last night halfway through, because it just seemed already very predictable in terms of content. The one thing I think that's really surprised me is that given that the element of surprise was obviously very important to the Prime Minister, he doesn't seem to have been ready. And I assumed on Wednesday that when the announcement was being made, that they'd spent the last couple of weeks secretly planning a dynamic first few days of the campaign that was going to get everybody on the back foot, and it seems to have gone almost in the other direction. So I think very safe by all the other parties, but surprisingly unprepared for his own surprise election, I think, the Prime Minister.
Yeah. Nikki, would you agree with that?
Well, the trouble with a surprise election is that these days in Westminster, to keep anything a genuine surprise, you have to tell almost nobody. And that includes your party HQ, your candidates, your cabinet, because the minute, as we saw on Wednesday, there's even a little hint of something. That's it. It's out there. So I suspect, like all these things, there was lots of planning going on amongst an incredible, I mean, I think it was literally down to sort of less than half a dozen people probably who knew. And then, the campaign HQ has to swing into action and start organising. I mean, I'm assuming that the visit to Derbyshire, for example, which is not very far away from where I'm sitting, and Maggie Throop posted it as the MP there, they would have known there was a Prime Ministerial visit, but not have known it was the first sort of campaign stop. which suddenly gives it a whole new level of scrutiny, as we saw. So I think it'll take a few days to get into the sort of campaign swing of things, and also because people have still got one foot in Westminster, as we'll perhaps talk about, which is all the things that we finished off there, before you really just hit the road and just get out there and just start campaigning full time.
Yeah. At this early stage, is this about what is this about for the leaders? What do they need to do? I mean, they're whizzing around the country. Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, all 4 nations of the UK have been visited by the 2 main candidates in this thing. Jack, what are you trying to do as you set out in day 1 and 2 of a campaign?
Well, you're trying to frame the choice, the debate. I mean, I have to say there is nothing more exciting, exhausting, memorable, challenging than leading your party in a full-scale election campaign. I did it twice, and it was it was the toughest thing I did in my life. It was it has amazing memories, but they have no idea what's in front of them for the next 6 weeks. But you're trying to frame the campaign, and I remember 2003 in Scotland. John Swinney was leader of the opposition at the time. It had been a fairly dull run-up to the election, and we were having a bit of a debate behind the scenes about whether to keep it dull or whether to liven it up a bit. And on day 1, I was trying to highlight the issue of antisocial behaviour in shopping centres as part of a manifesto commitment. And I walked into what was almost a pitch fight between some drug addicts waiting for the methadone and some old age pensioners trying to get into the chemists. And I was right in the middle of it. Everybody shouting at me on both sides, TV cameras everywhere. It could have been an absolute disaster, but it was the best moment to start the campaign because it was exactly what we wanted to talk about, and it gave me so much energy for the rest of the weeks of the campaign. It's funny how individual events can be a serious problem on the first couple of days, but they can also help define how you handle the weeks to come. I've had bad experiences as well, but that was
we'll
talk about those in a bit.
A danger turned into an opportunity that actually helped frame the whole campaign, and that's what they are both trying to do in these early days.
Just on that as well, Nikki, because I mean, Sunak's day 1 was him getting drenched in the rain as he made the long announcement that some were reflecting. Kate McCann was saying, is this a resignation statement when she first started hearing it? So is that what's framed his early campaign? Is when you think about the day 1 of you running to be an MP, what are you trying to do? What does day 1, day 2 look like? What should it look like?
Well, I think you do want to, exactly as Jack says, you want to have events organised or speeches made or interviews given that frame the campaign, that help your MPs and candidates to be able to go out on the doorsteps and say, the Prime Minister's talked about this or the party leaders talked about that, and this is what this election's all going to be about. And look, unfortunately, you can't control the weather, and the Great British Weather let the side down rather.
You could have brought a brolly.
Well, it was interesting, wasn't it? I think I saw on Twitter there was a great picture of Barack Obama saying, "This is we're holding a brolly in a sort of lots of rain, all the rest of it, saying this is how you look cool when you're making a speech in the rain." I mean, the ideal thing is you don't do a speech in the rain, but I suspect. See, I wonder whether he's not allowed to make that sort of speech from within Downing Street, because everyone was sort of saying, "Well, why didn't you do it inside?" Well, I suspect they would have absolutely thought about that, but these things weren't possible. Again, part of the thing about keeping it a surprise is you can't then set up, another venue easily without, absolutely setting off alarm bells about what you're going to do. But the other thing, the question is, the days 1 and 2. I mean, again, for party HQs, it is about photo opportunities. Because the campaign hasn't really gotten to the swing of it. It's about keeping your party leaders busy. It's about providing sort of, say photo opportunities is more than that, but it's about events, visiting different places. There's this sort of totemic thing about getting around the whole of the United Kingdom before the campaign will find its rhythm, which is what eventually unpredictability makes it exciting.
We talk about getting around the whole of the United Kingdom. We know that Keir Starmer's in Glasgow today. Rishi Sunak was in Inverness yesterday. So they've both visited the nation within the first 36 hours of campaigning. Notably, neither have been in London. I guess they're in London most of the time. Let's talk about the significance of Scotland in this campaign. And Jack, it is potentially going to have, well, a significant impact on the overall result and who the next Prime Minister is.
I think 2 years ago, we would all have been saying that the difference between a Labour majority and potentially a Labour minority government could be the whether or not they would win 20 seats in Scotland. I think given the opinion poll, if the opinion polls are right, and if there isn't a significant change in momentum during the next 6 weeks, which I still think is not impossible, then in some ways the Scottish results will be an added bonus, and in many ways they're actually going to be more of a test for the new leader of the SNP, because he cannot possibly have imagined 3 weeks ago, when he became party leader and First Minister, that he would be in an election campaign before the end of May. So I think, and I don't think John Swinney had a great day yesterday. He was defending this guy Matheson, who lied to Parliament about why he was claiming expenses on an iPad that he had been using for personal use. And I think already you can see that when you're in power, you're making decisions, then individual events can really throw you off course, even in an election campaign. And the SNP launch had a bit of that feel about it yesterday. So I think actually the Scottish campaign will be more focused on whether or not he can recover their position, rather than necessarily whether or not Scotland's going to get Labour over the line.
Nikki?
So I think that's fascinating. It's interesting hearing from Jack. I mean, I think I would have said before he answered that question that for Labour, Scotland is absolutely critical, because I think the more seats they gain in Scotland, it would seem to me say easier, the more likely they are to get to their majority that's needed. I think for the Conservatives, there are a number of seats in Scotland that it would be good to hold, and I think it's also good to show that actually the Conservatives can campaign all the way across the United Kingdom, and that was not always the case. As we know, Boris Johnson was not a popular figure in Scotland, for example. But I think as well, I mean, I'm assuming that this is also, if Labour have a good election, Scottish elections as well. So I think Scotland is critical, but I'd have said probably you'll probably see Keir Starmer spending more time there, I would expect, than Rishi Sunak.